Mindsets are learned. I'm going to say that again because I think it's important. Mindsets are learned. So your mindset, the way your mind is structured insofar as it relates with the world, is something that you've learned. And having learned it is probably a function of how you've been socialized. It's the people around you. And so your socialization drives your mindset drives your perspective drives how you act in the world. And I think for a lot of us young people, a big part of this entitlement mindset is purely because we're socializing wrong and we're keeping company with the wrong people. So how do you break it, right? First, you've got to ask yourself the question, is it serving you? Because I think there are a lot of people who have that mindset, but who are not served by that mindset. So you've got to ask yourself the question, is this mindset serving me? The second is you've got to ask yourself the question, who do I want to be? And what mindset is it going to take for me to be that person? Because if there is a disconnect between the person I want to be and the mindset I have now, it goes without saying that there's going to be an incongruency and inconsistency, and over time there's going to be a frustration because I'm never going to reach the levels that I want to reach, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to have a deep internal conversation. And then the third thing is to go, so what mindset do I need and where can I find that mindset?
Yes.
And you've got to start moving into the spaces and into the conversations where that mindset is what's happening, right? So the conversations you're in, the group of people you're hanging around with, the spaces that you're occupying and the spaces that you're allowing to occupy you, that is a big part of how you shift mindset. I don't know any person that ever changed the world by being entitled to it. So, if you want to leave an imprint in the world, it goes without saying that a mindset of entitlement is not going to work. And there's no doubt that as young people in the continent today, all of us want to leave an imprint in the world. Almost all of us. I don't know a single young African who doesn't want to leave this place better than they found it. So that means we need to fundamentally shift our mindsets.
Yeah.
For me, I had to ask myself the question around what does success mean a long time ago? And the reason I had to ask myself that question a long time ago was because it was a fairly long time ago that I started succeeding at some things that I was doing, right? So here's my definition of success. Success is when I have achieved what I wanted without compromising who I am. Now, the second part of that statement is actually very important because there are a lot of people who, to your point, are very happy to compromise who they are just so they can get that success. So they can be seen to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think once you get your definition of what success means,
yeah,
then the journey is a lot simpler. The journey is a lot easier. Let me also just make the point, Kwame. Success is personal, guys. There's no such thing as a communal success. Success is personal. Success is you, and it's for you. It's not for the rest of the world. And I learned this. I was in a place called Liechtenstein, beautiful country. A friend of mine is from there, and a guy called Alex who was getting married, and he and I did our MBA together in London. He invites me, so I'll go over. It's a tiny little country. I think the population is about 38,000 people, but it's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And I went into Liechtenstein, and my mindset was, man, this place is one of the highest GDP per capita in the world. It has one of the highest billionaires per square kilometer in the world. There's definitely going to be some serious money here.
Yeah.
Then I got there, and there were these like old, quaint houses, very quiet country lifestyle. That I was just like, what is going on? People were driving Rolls Royces that are 40 years old, and I'm from a continent where the Rolls Royce, for you to have money, the Rolls Royce has to be, you have to drive a Rolls Royce manufactured in the year that you're driving it. You know what I mean? Like that's. And so that's when I realized that there is a big difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Yeah.
And a part of that is how wealthy people express wealth. But also another part of that is how rich people find the need to constantly explain themselves.
Yeah.
So the reason you're buying the Lamborghini isn't because you're into cars. You're not buying the Lamborghini because you know the story of the old man Lamborghini, that he actually bought a Ferrari from Enzo Ferrari, drove it, and the car broke down, and he took it to Enzo Ferrari and he said, fix it. And Enzo said, I'm not fixing it. There's nothing wrong with the car. You're a bad driver. And the old man Lamborghini used to make tractors, so he decided that he would actually pivot his factory and start making supercars to compete with a Ferrari. That's the story of a Lamborghini. Now I wonder how many people driving Lamborghinis know the story of the lineage, right?
Yeah.
And where things come from. So that means we're buying into these possessions, not because we're buying into what they represent or the story, but because we're buying into what people are going to think about us.
Yeah.
So we're externalizing what we think is success. That's an incredibly dangerous thing to do, because I got to tell you, no matter how much money you make, there's always be somebody with more.
Yeah.
No matter how wealthy you get, there'll always be somebody wealthier. And no matter how many material possessions you have, there'll always be somebody with more material possessions.
Yeah.
And I think we've definitely raised this very materialistic generation that I'm not really worried anymore about how do I convert the masses to understand what true wealth is.
Yeah.
I'm worried about how do I educate people who are asking themselves the question, what is true wealth? Because it's a lot easier to teach somebody who's asking a question than to try and convert somebody who thinks they know everything. Yeah. There is nothing in human endeavor that has never been done before. I'm going to say it again. There is nothing in human endeavor that has never been done before. Number one. Number two, nobody in the world is smarter than you. They're just at a different point in their journey.
Yeah.
So what you got to realize is when you don't know something, it doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It means you're not yet at that part of the journey. I think it's because we come from this mindset where our education system is built to graduate us, not built to teach us to question things. So we go to school with the idea that I've got to learn information, put it in my head, repeat it in an exam or a test, then I graduate and I'm qualified. And the idea is that once I'm qualified, I'm a qualified pilot, a qualified lawyer, a qualified banker, a qualified speaker. The minute I'm qualified, I stop learning because I know everything now. And what I want to say is you have to recognize that we are all on a journey, we're all learning. I have this mindset, I always talk to my team about the mindset of a white belt. So I don't want any black belts in my teams. I only want white belts. And even for myself, I never want to be the black belt. And what that means is every single time where I feel like I've mastered something, I've got to move on to the next thing. And when I feel like I've mastered that thing, I've got to move on to the next thing. That's because what happens, and it's just the final statement on this. So here's what happens, right? So I start out in an industry like venture capital. I don't know much about it. I've got a little bit of money. I want to start investing in businesses. I don't know everything. So what do? I start moving in circles with people who understand this thing. Yeah. I start listening to their language. I listen to how they speak. I look at the relationships they have. I look at how they move, and I go, okay, so that's how this thing works. Then as I get into it and I start learning it, I open myself to the possibility that I don't know everything. Yeah. So at a different level, I'm always learning how to deal with that devil. Once I've dealt with that devil, I move on to the next level. There's going to be a different devil there too, right? But one of the most amazing things I've realized is I've had people who have opened doors to me because they saw me do the work. No one's going to open the door to you because you asked them. They're going to open the door to you because they can see you doing the work. And there is a consistency in your toil. There is a humility and a deliberateness in your effort that they can see, and they just like, look, you know, we might as well, you know. Yeah. There's that old expression by Denzel Washington. He says, you hang around the barbershop long enough, you have to get a haircut. You will get a haircut. Sooner or later, the barber's going to go, hey, yo, my chair is empty, jump in. In your quest for whatever you're doing, always seek wisdom. Wisdom. The wisdom, and wisdom is about having enough information to ask good questions. That's what wisdom's about. In a board meeting, and I was sitting back in the board meeting listening, and I have the privilege of having an incredible chairman of this particular board that I sit on. He's an amazing man, and I was just listening, and when he came to me and he was like, yo, give us your thoughts, I was able to add value because I came from a point of wisdom. And my thoughts weren't me pontificating. My thoughts were me asking good questions because I was listening the whole time. Yeah. And I think the question I want to ask everybody in this conversation is, are you listening? You're in lockdown, man. You're in isolation. Are you listening? Are you listening to your body? Are you listening to your relationships? Are you listening to the universe? Are you listening to your creator? Are you listening? Because if you're not listening, you're going to miss it. And if you miss it, the wisdom's going to miss you. it ain't gonna hit you. The quickest way to overcome feelings of inadequacy is to throw information at it. The reason you're feeling inadequate is because deep down inside you know that you don't know everything. Yeah. And so what you want to do is you want to start getting in as many hours as possible of getting information. The way to get rid of insecurity is to throw information at insecurity. Sooner or later you start sitting in conversations and going, oh, I know what they're talking about. And that's how you begin to eat away at that level of insecurity. I think that, here's a question. Why would you talk to people that you're afraid are going to steal your idea? That says a lot about the people you're going to.
Absolutely.
Right? So sometimes I think in the questions we ask, the answer is implied. I work with entrepreneurs, I finance entrepreneurs. I never sign a non-disclosure agreement. Because, if you say to me, you're going to come up with an idea about, how to make little cappuccino packs, how do you know that somebody hasn't already come up with that idea and they just didn't move with it yet? Yeah. So, and then I want to say one more thing. There is no such thing as the first idea or the first person with an idea. Only the first person to execute that idea. So what you got to do is you got to get your ass ready to execute as much as possible, as fast as possible. The discipline is in the execution. It's not in the idea. It's in the execution. The best way to travel and see the world, the best way to build your network, the best way to build your exposure, and the best way to build a capital base is to do what we do. It literally is to do what we do. So the reason for me, I've never really, I haven't found it difficult to get people to believe in my businesses, concurrent to my public speaking careers, because I had the networks and I was able to tap into them. Yeah. So, every market has an entry point, and there's people who control the customers. The best thing you want to do when you want to get into this game is you have to build your brand. Yeah. And that's about building top of mind in people's minds what you stand for and who you are. So there's a reason my very first book, I sold 6,000 copies the day it was launched in Barcelona in Spain. Today it was sold over 100,000 copies. There's a reason that book is called the Magna Carta of Exponentiality. It's because I wanted it to be known for the rest of my career that if you're having a conversation about exponentiality, you got to have me in the room. Yeah. Now, I'm working on other books. We've got 2 books, by the way, that are completed, 2 that I've written, 2 that are completed, ready for publication, and 3 other books that I'm busy working on at the moment. But top of mind, I wanted people to know exactly who I am and exactly what I'm about. So get your branding right. And then the second thing you've got to get right, and then this is the final thing, is get your associations right. A lot of people are associating incorrectly, and because you're associating incorrectly, people think you are the people you're hanging with, rather than you are who you are. So so I want to ask you, if somebody's listening to this conversation and thinking about becoming a public speaker, here's a question for you. Who do you follow on social media? Who do you follow on Twitter? What threads and conversations are you commenting on? What articles are you reading? Every single day, man, I read 3 consistent news portals. I read Bloomberg on my terminal, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. Absolutely. Then I'm tapping into the Reuters TV network to understand what's happening. That's every day. That's before I answer any emails, before I make any phone calls. I get my brain tapped into what's happening in the world around me. Absolutely. So the networks that you keep, it's not just about the people you keep, but also the networks of information that you choose to tap into. I believe in this, and I live by this, so I'll share it with you guys. Belief precedes achievement. Achievement does not precede belief. So if you're sitting out there and you don't believe in yourself, and you're waiting until you achieve something before you believe in yourself, you've got the equation the wrong way around. You've got to believe in you first. Yeah. And what that means is you've got to believe in you, you've got to believe in your dreams, you've got to believe. Because if you don't believe, then what's the point? Right? Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people walking around looking for evidence to support their beliefs, rather than knowing intrinsically and internally that your belief is valid. The minute you have the idea, that's the belief. God put that idea in your mind so that, because he knew you could do it. So who are you to keep doubting you? Yeah. This belief precedes achievement. Achievement does not precede belief.